We're gonna segue right into this hypothetical. You can all read it just for the speaker's benefit. I'll read it for you all. The hypothetical is: you are a young person who attends a masjid which does not have an official youth group. Your mosque has a history of controlling the debates and discussions regarding youth issues and contemporary problems, always steering away from any controversy and focusing on issues that are safe for the community to hear. How do you, as a young person, make your dissenting opinion heard? I'll start this way.
Sure. Do you want to address the comment the brother made, and then we can just involve it. I think Sheikh, you wanted to start.
What was the question? Was it between? With regards to the comment of the dear brother, thank you very much for the comment. And with this, how much time do we have? I have 10 minutes, mashallah, thank you. With regards to this area, I think there is a problem in our understanding of the term reform. In that, I remember speaking about reform in the few majalis, and I can see some people becoming very, very anxious, and some of them somehow cringe at the word reform. And this is a challenge that we have to, first of all, start to, impact the mindset of the people. That remember, the entire movement of Abu Abdullah al-Husayn's revolution was about reform. That's it. إني لم أخرج أشرا ولا بطرا ولا ظالما ولا مفسدا وإنما خرجت لطلب الإصلاح في أمة جدي. Those who know Arabic will understand إنما denotes exclusivity. إنما يريد الله ليذهب عنكم الرجس أهل البيت. Imam alayhi salam says, my entire mission is to reform. And the best and the greatest reformer in the history of mankind is none other than our holy beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. But of course, this subject of reform or islah is something a lot of people perhaps would seek to implement or talk about and develop. They may look at a few areas within Islamic practice or theology or spirituality where they feel there is a need to instigate a reform process. Who does the reform, and where does it start, and how far does it go, and how much are the masses involved are a number of very key questions. I don't want to take a lot of time. It's a massive area. But I think it is difficult to somehow think about, yes, there are people who are liberal, yes, there are people who are conservative, and then you have issues like this, which is challenging. Just so that I wouldn't take a lot of time, my kind of small comment regarding this particular situation is that most of us have come across similar cases in our perhaps areas that we live in or we've visited. And I think the key thing to understand for our youth is not to be deterred by the center who says no. There are a number of things to do. First of all, to try and sit down with the elders of the community, a group of youth who are active in the community, and they need to be individuals who will make themselves heard. You can't just go and demand things. You sit down and after being seen to be fairly active or sincere or eager to participate and present it. There are ways to persuade. There is an art which is known as the art of persuasion. It's not just simply coming in and saying, I need to have this program, I need to present the speaker or whatever. That's the first thing. Second thing is to try and be part of the board if the bylaws or constitution or whatever allows it to be the case, to be involved in that level. And the third, if you found that all these levels, all these areas have kind of shut and there's no way to progress, to have these programs, for example, at the center itself, then we know of some youth organizations who have hired halls, who have gone and fundraised and been able to kind of establish programs parallel, not necessarily in the center, because there is also another thing to be understood here. I know, or I agree what the brothers have said and the sisters have mentioned regarding, the involvement, and there are difficult questions and delicate areas that people have and so on. But there are some topics which may be viewed by certain individuals as the mimbar might not be the right medium to discuss. Because if you look at the way the Quran addresses certain topics, it talks or names for certain processes that the human beings undertake. It gives a very overall respectful, polite way, rather than explicitly mentioning that process, for example. Yes, when the male and the female get together, for example. So the key thing is to reflect is maybe the center or the mosque is not necessarily the right medium as such, because you're not going to be able to open up as much. I remember I said to people, and it's here only in the United States that I did it, and perhaps I wouldn't be able to do it in many centers in the United Kingdom, I'll be honest with you, that I gave an entire lecture in Muharram, and people here are going to pass judgment, perhaps, God knows, about homosexuality. And that was because the community here in the States, one of the particular communities close to Chicago, requested that. Now, when I heard a lot of feedback from people, how can you be talking about this from the minbar of the Holy Prophet? Yes? Some people accept it, some don't. Of course, it depends on how you present the subject as well. It may not be necessarily appropriate in every single medium. Find the right medium to do so, but let it not deter you to discuss these subjects in a professional manner with the involvement of scholars too.
There we go, okay. I think dovetailing off of your comments, Sheikh, and also the question is that, from my perspective, I think the one key portion that's missing in this discussion is the importance of mentorship. I think youth definitely require a position on the board. Youth definitely need to engage in discussions about, potentially discussing controversial topics or not discussing these topics within a mosque setting. But really, I think that the important part is underscoring the role of mentors in the community. I think even for myself, coming from a background of not really understanding the community at times, having a mentor who I trusted, who could say, you know what, this is not the right time and place. I could defer that decision to him, but then what I negotiated with him is that you also need to provide a context to me as to why that decision is valid. So this really kind of highlights the importance of having a mentor in the community that you can trust and work with. But it also, I think, raises the important issue of providing that level of mentorship to the next generation as well. And I think this is something that's severely lacking in our communities, is that a lot of us are seeking mentorship, but at the same time, the mentors aren't available. And so this is an area that I think we need to really focus and hone in on.
So I'm really glad this whole thing came up. I don't know, can you hear me? Is the mic on? Okay. I'm glad this came up because I am my own drug. I'm always thinking. A lot of things, see, I come from a professional background where I've been working since I was 12, and the key thing that I've learned in any job that I've ever undertaken is something called follow-up. There always needs to be follow-up. It's amazing that we're all here today at Ummah, which is why one of my propositions to Azma, whenever I get to see him, he's a very, very busy man, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give him tawfiq and all that he does. But I love Ummah for one reason. Alhamdulillah, get invited to a lot of places, but whenever Ummah calls, I drop everything. Because it's a place where ideas are not just heard, but they're acted upon. Rida gives me her support. I dropped her an email about an idea. She just went with it. Azma, same thing. Whenever you put ideas, they go with it. So my follow-up idea is this. It's called Ummah Following On, which I've already made the abbreviation, that is UFO, because it's an alien concept to have these reforms taking place. And I really think for those of us who come here, a lot of you are from the DC area, Dearborn area, a lot of us are from the similar areas, right? So if we pitch in the ideas, we could have a kind of satellite, continuous month-to-month Ummah programs happening in your own region, where the only thing that you need from the committee over here is guidelines. That's all you need. You don't need to fly out. They don't need to fly to you. Alhamdulillah, they have the phone numbers of many speakers, as well as many thinkers, and they have a very, very strong core team. And you can kind of become your own satellite thing, where if you, for example, want to discuss politics, they will feed ideas to you. Listen, this is what's happening in the political horizon of America. This is what's going to come up next. Are you ready? You discuss it amongst yourself. You feed back to them. It doesn't necessarily need to be in the mosque. Sheikh beautifully put it. It does not necessarily need to take place in the mosque. If you look at the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there's only a handful of speeches that he gave on the minbar. The majority of the time you would read, and a group of Arabs came and Rasulullah was sitting with his friends having conversation or food. It's a normal thing. We need to have these discussions, circles, and I think we kind of get it confused. Again, it comes back to my talk about this idea of belonging. A lot of us feel that the mosque is controlled by an elite and we don't have a say, and therefore we get into this like quagmire of struggle for power, and it doesn't need to be that way. We can respect the mosque and understand this is the place where Muharram Majalis take place. That's fine. We can also have somewhere else, or we could just come to the committee and say, can we hire the hall? It doesn't need to be a mosque sanctioned event. It could be our own event. But I strongly, strongly, strongly recommend the youth to follow up with the Ummah team and say, look, can we have you, feed ideas to us and, I don't know, lend us or connect us with certain speakers, and it will be great. I just want to say on a note, see one of the brothers in the back from New York, and I really am very proud of the New York community, not the whole community, but this particular group of brothers. Okay, I love New York, by the way, it's home. They have this thing called the annual iftar, okay, and it's the only iftar place that I've been to, London and here, where you get a bunch of Muslims, Sunni and Shia, get together, put their money together. They have iftar, and they actually, it's big. I've never really been present, but I always follow up. And not only that, they always pick an organization that in the month of Muharram, in the month of Ramadan, they raise money for that cause. It's very lavish. It's a big thing going on. It's like a party, literally, in the middle of Ramadan, after iftar time, obviously. But it's all Muslims together. And it's not led by any uncles or aunts. It's a group of youth, younger than me, majority of them are, right? But they found that this is something that would not fly in mosque, so they went and they hired a place, and they charge people, hey, you want to come to the iftar? You got to pay to come in, or you got to sponsor something. So you have that potential, and alhamdulillah, you have the infrastructure in place and the support system in place, and we're just waiting to hear back from you guys. Give us your ideas, and we will help you make them into a reality, inshallah. Okay?
More comment.
I'm not going to take too long, but I really wanted to comment on what the brother had said, and just very, very briefly on this, because I know we're probably running out of time. I have seen the rift that you're talking about. There is definitely a rift that exists between conservatives and liberals in our centers, in our communities. That's there. You have to be blind to not see it. The point to be made, though, in the beginning is, somehow we typically tend to think liberal equals progressive and conservative equals backwards, and that is just not the case. In many of my experience, I've seen liberals who are very backward and conservatives who are very forward-moving, right? And I'm not saying this to bring any side up or down, but there's some sort of, what I'm all for is a kind of two-pronged approach in our centers, because I genuinely believe that the conservative community is extremely important to the survival of the liberal community. Here's why. I don't know if anybody have looked at someone like Tocqueville, but he talks about the early American community and how the conservatives and how the liberals had a very big clash amongst themselves. And the liberals had all these wild ideas. They wanted to do all these great things. They wanted to move forward. And the conservatives did something which was hold them back to a more reasonable standard and say, let's move at a really slow pace. We like what you're doing. We might not agree to some ideas, but there's a pace that we need to move forward on. I'll draw an example from our American political system. Take a look at the abortion movement, the pro-life movement. There are many people who agree with the pro-life movement, and there are others who agree with the pro-choice movement, those who are pro-abortion. And in my opinion, whatever your political stance is, whether you're for abortion or against abortion, the pro-life movement is extremely important, because what it does is it holds the pro-choice movement to a reasonable standard and say, hold on, you want to move forward with this, we're watching you. You need to be very careful with how fast you move forward. So in many ways, the conservative movement holds back the liberal movement. We see that with big government, right? The Republicans hold down the Democrats when it comes to big government, and they do the same thing with budget and spending. It's important. What I don't like, and this is kind of following to this concept, is when one side tries to stifle the conversation for the other side. When one side pretends that the other side doesn't exist. When the side that wears hijab pretends that the side that doesn't wear hijab doesn't exist, right? When the side that wants to do Ziyarat Ashura is told by the other side, hey, this isn't important, don't do this, right? That's really, really problematic. What needs to happen is a sole conversation between the two sides. So if one group, the liberal side, comes and says, look, on the 10th of Muharram, I'd like to invite a couple of governors to come to the Ramadan program or to the Muharram program, and I'd like them to give a talk after the majlis. What's your thoughts on this? The conservative side can't come and say, no, this will never happen. We will never, ever make or cut Latum down by 10 minutes so you can have your governor speak. That can't be the case, because then you're stifling conversation. And the same to the other side. The liberal side can't come and say, forget your 15 minutes of matam, we want a governor to speak, this culture isn't important. That doesn't work either. What needs to be is a balance between the two in a conversation. So my issue is with banning, blacklisting, stifling conversation, not allowing expression to be there, expecting ideas to all be the same. That, in my opinion, is an issue. So with regards to this hypothetical, I think the situation is pretty simple. It's not as complex as we think of it to be. In many cases, things like this end up working out very well by young people simply saying, we're holding a Q&A session with the scholar, whether it's at a private home, whether it's at a center, or whether it's somewhere else. The real issue is actually coming up and saying, hey, I've got a concern. Setting up a venue is easy. That happens all the time. I've seen so many communities within a day or two, boom, a venue is set up, a place is set up, a location is set up. It's getting that courageous young person to come out and say, I've got a different idea. I read something different. I need to talk to somebody about it. That seems to be the challenge here. And if we can get more people to do this, we can get more of the acceptance of different ideas, then we can actually tackle those ideas and come to grips with how different they are. So I hope that kind of answers it and kind of sheds light on that issue. Thank you.